It is Wednesday, April 7th, 2021, and you're listening to Local News Live, a production of AOC Community Media in partnership with the Acadiana Advocate. Their team of journalists print the stories important to our community and state, and we are happy to read you some of those stories. You can hear Local News Live Monday through Friday from 9 a.m. to 10 a.m. on AOC 1, the AOC Community Media channel on YouTube, and on Cypress Street Radio at aocinc.org/CS Radio. You can find print versions of these stories and more at theadvocate.com. We couldn't bring you this community service without the generosity of our volunteer newsreaders. Today, we're joined by Phyllis Grifford. Welcome to Local News Live, Phyllis.
Thanks.
Well, thanks so much for reading. I know we have a few headlines, so I'm going to get out of the way and go listen on Cypress Street.
In Acadiana, COVID-19 coronavirus, the latest. Vaccine demand slows as availability increases. As appointments go unfilled, providers say the hardest work is ahead. By Emily Woodruff, Yusuf Radad, and Katie Galliano, staff writers. When COVID-19 vaccines first opened to Louisiana residents over 70 in January, there was a mad scramble for appointments. Overloaded phone systems shut down as older adults called for hours to get an appointment. Lines stretched outside pharmacy doors. In Jefferson Parish, 500 appointments were snapped up in 5 minutes at the Ilario Center in mid-February. But by the time the state opened vaccines to anyone 16 and older last week, appointments at many hospitals and clinics were wide open. Clinics found themselves with extra doses on the verge of expiring. LCMC Health in New Orleans started allowing walk-ins for the first appointments a day before the expansion. Ochsner Health, the state's largest healthcare provider, has open availability on its vaccine appointment page. And an analysis from GoodRx, a company that tracks drug prices, found that 48 of Louisiana's 64 parishes had vaccine availability at Walmart and CVS pharmacies. Quote, "We've hit the low-hanging fruit of people who were very anxious. I wanted to be vaccinated yesterday," said Dr. Jeffrey Elder, LCMC Health Medical Director of Emergency Management, who oversees the system's mass vaccination effort at the Ernest N. Morial Convention Center. Quote, "Now we're in the trenches," end quote. The change in vaccine demand and supply represents a shift that public health experts knew was coming but did not expect this soon, Elder said, and it could be a sign that Louisiana may have a lot of work ahead. Quote, "I think it would be a fallacy to think we can coast from here," said Dr. Joe Cantor, the state health officer. Cantor noted that the state received 150,000 doses this week, compared with about 90,000 weekly doses a month ago. But even considering increased supply, there are signs that Louisiana may have a harder time giving out the vaccine than other states. Louisiana ranks in the bottom 5 for a person's likelihood of receiving a COVID-19 vaccine, according to a recent survey by the U.S. Census Bureau. Only about 36% of adults said they hadn't received a vaccine yet, but would once it is available. The U.S. average is about 51%. At the same time, Louisiana is not keeping up with the national average for the percentage of population vaccinated, hanging in the bottom 6 states at about 28%. It's also in the bottom 8 for the number of doses still sitting on shelves, having used 73% of its vaccine supply, down from a high of 88% in mid-February, according to data collected by USA Facts. It's not so much that demand has completely fallen off. Officials at LCMC Health and Ochsner Lafayette General Medical Center said appointments remained steady last week at about 1,000 per day. But with vaccine shipments larger than ever, that means many appointments are going unfilled. Our Lady of the Lake Regional Medical Center in Baton Rouge has been jabbing thousands of arms on the weekends and hundreds during the week. But just before eligibility was expanded, officials at the state's largest hospital say they noticed some appointment slots weren't filling up as fast as they had been before the governor expanded eligibility to adults and older teens. Quote, "You could tell the interest is waning," said Dr. Catherine O'Neill, the Lake's chief medical officer. O'Neill said it's difficult to read the state's trajectory with its effort to vaccinate enough people to effectively end the pandemic, but the toughest work is ahead. Quote, "That last push will be the hardest," O'Neill said. "It will be convincing people who really aren't ready to get the vaccine that they need it to get it to end the pandemic," end quote. The state hasn't yet reached the last push, but it may need to adapt its approach as challenges to vaccinate people change, according to Charles Stocker, a Tulane University healthcare economist who studies vaccine policy. Quote, "Hesitancy is on a continuum," Stocker said. "As you move from these efficient mass vaccination sites and think about moving those sites to the people, this is when you start getting into outreach and mobile vaccination units and start chipping away at that," unquote. And there's evidence that changing the strategy might make a difference in the state's race to vaccinate as many people as possible before a variant of the virus challenges the vaccine's effectiveness. When NOLA Ready sent out a text message last week to residents that a local clinic needed to give out 40 expiring doses by the end of the day, there was a line out the door, even as appointments went unfilled at mass vaccination sites throughout the city. The clinic, Odyssey House Louisiana Community Health Center, vaccinated about 60 people before it had to turn away people at the door. Quote, "There are tons of people who want it, and there are providers who have it," said Dr. Jennifer Vielander, Chief Medical Officer at Odyssey House. Quote, "But there doesn't seem to necessarily be the best way to direct those people where to go. And so people are left calling around and not knowing where to look," unquote. Some people who showed up needed a second dose after having trouble scheduling it in a convenient place, like Cliff Swanberry and William King, friends who got the first dose in Mississippi. And others happened to get the text when they were free from jobs with non-standard hours. Quote, "We're open during the day and I'm off by 3, and most places only give it until 4, said Jordan Candies, a server at Elizabeth's in the Bywater. She hopped in her car after friends forwarded her the text and got one of the expiring doses during her day off." Patricia Thompson, spokesperson for Ochsner Lafayette General, said the hospital is focusing on outreach to underserved communities, including Acadiana's Black and Latino communities, by shifting its main clinic location to the Martin Luther King Recreation Center through May 30th, and partnering with Asociación Cultural Latino Acadiana for a vaccination clinic at the Robichaux Recreation Center on Sunday, including disseminating flyers in Spanish. The hospital will also increase inventory of the Johnson & Johnson vaccine as interest in the single-shot vaccine rises. One of the biggest challenges remains educating the community about vaccine eligibility expansion, ensuring people are aware that doses are available, and removing perceived hurdles to scheduling. Quote, "I was having a conversation with someone yesterday, and they still thought it was 65 and up for eligibility," Thompson said. Staff writer Jeff Adelson contributed to this report. SLCC will offer many fall courses in person, by Ken Stickney, staff writer. South Louisiana Community College has confirmed that it will offer some face-to-face instruction in the fall, with department heads reserving at least 20% of their class offerings for such in-person instruction. Darcy Becks, interim vice chancellor of academic and student affairs, said summer and fall registration is open until the first week of classes. Priority registration for current students was offered at mid-month, and she said while many students prefer face-to-face instruction, others have become adept with other ways of accessing courses. Quote, "In the beginning, online and hybrid were traumatic," she said. "In the past year, it has become more comfortable for students and teachers. They've just gotten more comfortable with themselves. They know how to upload assignments and can do more that is required in remote learning." She said the definition of face-to-face instruction, which was generally accepted as involving students and teachers in the classroom, has broadened for many students to include classes on WebEx in which they can watch their teachers lecturing or lecturing in a classroom. She said department heads have allocated about 20% of their classes for face-to-face instruction. For example, she said if there are 20 sections of a math class, 4 will be held face-to-face. She said, although some students favor remote instruction, it's not necessarily because of caution about COVID-19, but because they can make higher education better suit their needs. For example, if they have children at home, remote instruction can be less burdensome. Quote, "They still have structure, but more options to balance things at home," she said. Classes in these programs will offer some face-to-face sections this fall: business, criminal justice, general studies, digital media, and Louisiana transfer. These class format definitions have been created for the fall semester. Students should reference these definitions when selecting a class section. Face-to-face courses, parentheses, LEC, lab, or LEC/lab. Students come to campus and sit in the room with an instructor and classmates. Students should register for the lecture and lab course type. Hybrid, parentheses, HYB or HYD. Students come to campus on some days, then meet with their instructor for other days on WebEx. Students should register for the HYB or HYD course type. High Sync has an S next to the course title. This option is for students who don't want to come to campus but would like to meet with their instructor each class period on WebEx. Students should register for the High Sync course type. Online, web. This option is for students who don't want to come to campus. They want to complete classwork online without having to log in at a specific class time. Students should register for the online web course type. Bex said faculty members are on board with the offerings. Certain disciplines, she said, lend themselves to different modes of delivery. For example, math is more easily taught and learned in person, she suggested, while English and psychology might be better offered remotely. She said the new ways to offer classes represent a trend that higher education will probably not go back to simply offering most courses face-to-face, but will continue to offer other options. She said SLCC will provide additional training for faculty members to offer their courses by a variety of methods. service announcement. United Way of Acadiana offering free tax preparation. The United Way of Acadiana is offering free tax preparation services through its Volunteer Income Tax Assistance, VITA, program. The program provides low and moderate income individuals and families with free, reliable assistance with filing federal tax returns. There are 12 filing locations participating this year throughout the Acadiana region. Most locations are by appointment only due to COVID-19 safety restrictions. Visit unitedwayofacadiana.org/VITA, that's VITA, for site locations, opening dates, and to make appointments. For additional resources, visit myfreetaxes.com to learn more about alternate free or low-cost filing options currently available. The VITA program is just one way the United Way of Acadiana is working to help individuals and families achieve and maintain financial stability. Learn about additional programs by visiting unitedwayofacadiana.org. Acadiana News continued. Quote, "He was actively dying in front of us. Doctor details measures that saved Doosan Police Chief," by Megan Wyatt, staff writer. When Kip Judice's voice seemed raspier than normal over the weekend, he and his family didn't think much of it. The Doosan Police Chief has long had a signature scratchiness, and it's allergy season in South Louisiana after all. But Judice, 56, suddenly felt as if the wind had been knocked out of him after bending over to put his shoes on Saturday afternoon, according to his daughter. He and his wife had been getting ready at their Scott home for the wedding of a family friend, and Judice croaked to his wife that he needed to go to the hospital because he couldn't breathe. Quote, "There was just no more breath in him," said the police chief's daughter, Emily Judice. Quote, "He told my mom he needed the hospital, and she said, 'Do you want me to call an ambulance?' He said, 'No way.' He knew there was no way it would get to them fast enough, so he had her load him up in the car, and they headed to the ER." She said her father thought he might be having an allergic reaction. It wouldn't have been the first time. He also thought he may be having a heart attack like the one he had suffered 10 years earlier, she said. Kip Judice arrived at the Our Lady of Lourdes Emergency Center in Scott around 5:30 p.m. Saturday. He was gasping for air, barely conscious, in his wife's vehicle when Lane LeBlanc, a retired police officer who worked security at the emergency department, recognized him. LeBlanc carried the police chief into the standalone emergency department, a move that could have helped save his life. Quote, "We got him out of the car. Nothing else can happen if that doesn't happen," said Dr. Michael Odene, the emergency room physician who was working at the time. Quote, "You have dead weight that you're dragging into an ER, literally dying, and he's a big man, and he made that happen. Everything was just right. Any one component of these first 25 minutes goes wrong, and the outcome is different." Unquote. Odene, who has worked at the freestanding emergency department since it opened in December 2019, said he and his team immediately worked to resuscitate the police chief, open his airway, and stabilize him. Quote, "On initial look, he was actively dying in front of us. That means everything not only has to be perfect, but it has to be fast and perfect. He wasn't moving any air. That was the biggest thing we, all the medical professionals in the room, noticed," Odene said. Quote, "I was the doctor in charge, but without the nurses being very fast and perfect, he would not have made it. There was no question about that. They were as good as any group could have been. None of them blinked. None of them froze. They just seamlessly handled this crisis, this emergency. Their quick work opened up Kip Giudice's airway and allowed vital oxygen back into his body. Odene said there's no doubt in his mind that the police chief would have died if he had traveled further to seek treatment at a Lafayette hospital. Kip Giudice was conscious during treatment at the Scott Emergency Department, and his family says he remembers receiving epinephrine and steroids, the life-saving treatments often used for people suffering from severe allergic reactions. Quote, "He told me Monday he remembers almost everything," Emily Giudice said. Quote, "Once he was in the emergency room on the actual table, he remembers being jabbed with the EpiPen. He remembers hearing the doctor tell all of the other nurses and the staff what to do. He said it was pretty scary." Once stabilized, Kip Giudice was transferred to the main campus of Our Lady of Lourdes in Lafayette and admitted into the hospital's intensive care unit around 7:30 p.m. Saturday. He continued to receive epinephrine and steroid treatments overnight to keep his airway open and to keep him stable, according to his daughter. By midday Sunday, Kip Giudice and his family would finally learn what had caused the sudden breathlessness: a tumor on his vocal cords. Quote, "Anyone who has spoken with my dad knows his signature raspy voice," Emily Giudice said. Quote, "He's always had that voice. They said he's probably always had that mass." The police chief underwent surgery Monday afternoon to remove the mass, which was the size of a thumb joint. Procedure is similar to a tonsillectomy, but with smaller tools, his daughter said. A biopsy will determine if the tumor is malignant or benign. A hospital doctor told the family there's no reason to believe the mass is cancerous. Kip Giudice is recovering well from the surgery and was discharged from the hospital on Tuesday. He's expected to be able to return to work next week, according to his daughter. The police chief will be unable to speak for 3 days as he recovers, which his family says might be the most challenging part of the whole ordeal. Quote, "It might be a little traumatic for him," Emily Giudice said with a laugh, "but he'll be okay." Garden Plaza Hotel sold, will be converted into apartments, by Adam Daigle, Acadiana business editor. The former Garden Plaza Hotel and Conference Center in North Lafayette has been sold and will be converted into over 200 apartment homes later this year. Covington-based Servio Capital and other investors bought the 244-unit hotel that served as one of the 3 full-service hotels in the Lafayette area, but had gone into foreclosure last year when hotels struggled during the coronavirus pandemic. The purchase is part of a nationwide trend involving hotels that have either gone into foreclosure as a result of the pandemic or sold at a discounted rate. The group, CPR Holdings, bought the property at 2032 Northeast Evangeline Thruway from Home Bank for $2.4 million after it went into foreclosure in November under the previous owner, Golden LA Properties, the records show. The group hopes to convert it into 217 units using low-income tax credits and use the former Holiday Inn Hotel as workforce housing for employees at Amazon or the yet-to-be-announced personal protective equipment manufacturer in Broussard, which could employ at least a combined 1,000 workers. Quote, "I've been a real estate investor for over 20 years. And we did very well after the housing crash of 2008 with the foreclosure market, Servio CEO Ryan Inc. said. Quote, "This is the same thing, only larger. Hotels are getting crushed, people are meeting less, and the Garden Plaza really thrived on the meeting business." Plans call for creating mostly one-bedroom apartments with some two-bedroom units. The large meeting room and other spaces inside will be converted to amenities, such as an indoor theater, a game room, a cafe, and a pickleball sports area. The pool and hot tub area will be kept in the designs, which could take 6 months of construction. The development will also be gated. The design will be similar to the Plato's Cave development in Branson, Missouri, Inc. said. Investors there converted the former Days Inn into a 170-unit apartment complex. Quote, "We just see an opportunity in the marketplace to solve two problems," he said. Quote, "One is the need for affordable housing, and with lumber costs and construction costs, we can't make places fast enough for people to live. There's definitely a housing crisis in the U.S. In Lafayette, Amazon and Oxnard are going to bring in 15,000 people in 5 years." The Garden Plaza's closure comes after the Wyndham Garden Hotel, 1801 West Pinhook Road, also closed, leaving the DoubleTree by Hilton Lafayette as the city's only full-service hotel, said Ben Berthelot, Lafayette Travel President and CEO. Several hotels across the country have been converted into apartments or office spaces after the industry was ravaged by the pandemic. Almost 20% of U.S. hotels with securitized mortgages were delinquent on their loans by November, according to the Wall Street Journal. That, coupled with some markets that overbuilt, some in the Lafayette market have indicated it has too many basic hotels for its size, meaning more hotels will be repurposed for other uses. Inc. said his group hopes to have $100 million in acquisitions in the next 2 years. Quote, "We don't want to see anyone's business hurting, but it is what it is," Inc. said. Quote, "These things either turn into landfills, stay vacant, or turn into blighted properties. We're planning on bringing these properties back to life." Today in History by the Associated Press. Today is Wednesday, April 7th, the 97th day of 2021. There are 268 days left in the year. Today's highlight in history: on April 7th, 1915, jazz singer-songwriter Billie Holiday, also known as Lady Day, was born in Philadelphia. On this date, in 1862, Union forces led by General Ulysses S. Grant defeated the Confederates at the Battle of Shiloh in Tennessee. In 1922, the Teapot Dome scandal had its beginnings as Interior Secretary Albert B. Fall signed a secret deal to lease U.S. Navy petroleum reserves in Wyoming and California to his friends, oilmen Harry Sinclair and Edward L. Doheny, in exchange for cash gifts. In 1927, the image and voice of Commerce Secretary Herbert Hoover were transmitted live from Washington to New York in the first successful long-distance demonstration of television. In 1945, during World War II, American planes intercepted and effectively destroyed a Japanese fleet, which included the battleship Yamato that was headed to Okinawa on a suicide mission. In 1957, shortly after midnight, The last of New York's electric trolleys completed its final run from Queens to Manhattan. In 1962, nearly 1,200 Cuban exiles tried by Cuba for their roles in the failed Bay of Pigs invasion were convicted of treason. In 1984, the Census Bureau reported Los Angeles had overtaken Chicago as the nation's second city in terms of population. In 1994, civil war erupted in Rwanda, a day after a mysterious plane crash claimed the lives of the presidents of Rwanda and Burundi. In the months that followed, hundreds of thousands of minority Tutsi and Hutu moderates were slaughtered by Hutu extremists. In 2015, Michael Thomas Slager, a white South Carolina police officer, was charged with murder in the shooting death of Black motorist Walter Lamer Scott after law enforcement officials saw a cell phone video taken by a bystander. Slager pleaded guilty to federal civil rights charges and was sentenced to 20 years in prison. Prosecutors agreed to drop state murder charges that remained after a jury couldn't agree whether he had committed a crime. 10 years ago, a powerful aftershock struck Japan near the same area that had been devastated by a mighty earthquake and tsunami nearly a month earlier. No giant wave or loss of life was reported. 5 years ago, Russian President Vladimir Putin denied any links to offshore accounts and described the Panama Papers document leak scandal as part of a U.S.-led plot to weaken Russia. 1 year ago, Wisconsin went ahead with in-person voting after the state Supreme Court blocked the governor's order to postpone the primary. Thousands waited in line in Milwaukee amid fears that the voting would bring a spike in the state's coronavirus cases. Today's birthday. Country singer Bobby Bare is 86. R&B singer Charlie Thomas of the Drifters is 84. Former California Governor Jerry Brown is 83. Movie director Francis Ford Coppola is 82. Actor Roberta Shore is 78. Singer Patricia Bennett, The Chiffons, is 74. Singer John Oates is 73. Former Indiana Governor Mitch Daniels is 72. Singer Janice Ian is 70. Country musician John Dietrich is 70. Actor Jackie Chan is 67. College and Pro Football Hall of Famer Tony Dorsett is 67. Actor Russell Crowe is 57. Christian and jazz singer Mark Kibble from Take Six is 57. Actor Bill Bellamy is 56. Rock musician Dave Yorkie Palmer of Space is 56. Rock musician Charlie Hall of The War on Drugs is 47. Former football player turned analyst Tiki Barber is 46. Actor Heather Burns is 46. Christian rock singer-musician John Cooper of Skillet is 46. Actor Kevin Alejandro is 45. Zodiac. Aries, March 21st to April 19th. Be proud of your accomplishments. Present your thoughts and actions with clarity and determination. Use your connections and credentials to get ahead. Taurus, April 20th to May 20th. Stick to a moderate lifestyle. Too much of anything will lead you down the wrong path. Focus on disciplined activities, taking care of your responsibilities, and doing your best to excel. Gemini, May 21st to June 20th. Participate in virtual events, and you will meet someone interesting. Accept the inevitable, and you will discover a way to take better care of yourself and your finances. Cancer, June 21st to July 22nd. Use your skills innovatively, and you'll bypass some of the pettiness going on around you. Avoid joint ventures and shared expenses. You are better off working alone. Leo, July 23rd to August 22nd. Tag along with people you find refreshing and trendy, and you'll discover information and ideas that will help you get ahead. Learn all you can. Strive to make changes that support better relationships. Virgo, August 23rd to September 22nd. Don't limit yourself. Aim to please and get things done correctly and on time. Your performance will affect the way others treat you. Don't waste time criticizing others. Libra, September 23rd to October 23rd. Be open to suggestions that will save you time and money. A commitment to someone will encourage a positive lifestyle change. Be honest about your feelings, plans, and expectations. Scorpio, October 24th to November 22nd. Make a domestic change, but don't go over budget. Make sure you get what you want at a price you can afford. Refuse to let anyone play on your emotions. If someone asks for too much, say no. Sagittarius, November 23rd to December 21st. Look out for a friend or relative. Your interest and concern will make you more aware of what's going on around you. A change at home will encourage a better relationship with a loved one. Capricorn, December 22nd to January 19th. You won't get along with everyone today, so keep your opinions to yourself. Bide your time, check out new possibilities, and make a domestic adjustment that will ease stress. Aquarius, January 20th to February 19th. Spring forward with enthusiasm. Get fit, healthy, and ready for your next adventure. Look for prospects that interest you and start conversations that can lead to a new and exciting position. Pisces, February 20th to March 20th. Look for new ways to use your skills, knowledge, and attributes. Reach out to someone you enjoy collaborating with. Don't share your plans with someone who is overly critical. The horoscope, an entertainment feature, is not based in scientific fact. State. Official. Louisiana, LSU retaliated over her efforts to report Miles. Lewis said she attempted to report sexual harassment allegations. By Andrea Gallo, staff writer. LSU's Associate Athletic Director of Football Recruiting alleges she was subjected to a hostile work environment and years of retaliation after she repeatedly attempted to report sexual harassment allegations involving former football coach Les Miles, according to a new report from USA Today. Sharon Lewis, who also oversees alumni relations for the athletic department, told USA Today she plans this week to file a series of lawsuits, including a federal Title IX lawsuit, a state whistleblower lawsuit, an Equal Employment Opportunity Commission grievance, and a lawsuit alleging violations of the Racketeer Influence and Corrupt Organizations Act, better known as RICO. Lewis, who is Black, alleges she has been discriminated against based on her race and sex, underpaid, and punished for trying to stop sexual harassment on campus. Lewis has not filed the lawsuits yet. Her representative sent out a news release Tuesday afternoon saying they plan to file the lawsuits Wednesday and would hold a news conference then. USA Today published a story about the legal filings Tuesday based on interviews with Lewis and advanced copies of the suits. Defendants expected to be named in Lewis's lawsuits include Athletic Director Scott Woodward, former LSU President F. King Alexander, Executive Deputy Athletic Director Verge Osbury, Senior Associate Athletic Director Miriam Seeger, Senior Associate Athletic Director Bo Bonson, various LSU Board of Supervisors members, and the law firm Taylor Porter. The news release says Lewis is seeking $50 million. Quote, members of the LSU Board of Supervisors, LSU Athletic Department, LSU leadership, and their law firm, Taylor Porter, entered into a conspiracy to hide Les Miles' sexual harassment investigation from federal officials and the public and to retaliate against Ms. Lewis. One of Lewis's attorneys, Tammy Brown, said in a news release Tuesday. Quote, over the last 8 years, Ms. Lewis has stood up to protect LSU female student workers and as a result has suffered unimaginable retaliation sanctioned by the LSU Board of Supervisors, unquote. Lewis's role overseeing LSU's recruiting office led to frequent clashes between her and Miles. Those disagreements often centered on the types of students Lewis hired to work in the office. Many of the allegations in Lewis's threatened lawsuit are referenced in the recent report by the law firm Hirsch Blackwell, which was hired by LSU to investigate the university's handling of sexual misconduct allegations. But the lawsuits add detail to those accounts. For instance, Lewis told USA Today that Miles pressured her to replace Black student workers with blonde or light-skinned Black women, whom Miles believed more attractive. She also told the newspaper that within Miles' first few days on the job, he announced to a room of coaches that he preferred blonde women working in his office, and later complimented a blonde woman as, quote, the face of recruiting. Another time, Lewis said Miles told her the recruiting office had, quote, too many fat girls, Black girls, and ugly girls, USA Today reported. Lewis said she reported her interactions with Miles to her superiors, including Osbury and Bonson, but they hinted that perhaps she should find a different job. Miles' attorney, Peter Ginsburg, denied those allegations to USA Today. He has claimed that Miles did nothing wrong during his time at LSU and was unfairly investigated based on false claims. But Lewis told USA Today that early in 2012, Miles, enabled by those around him, started to interview student workers alone in his office at night. Some of the female students told Lewis that Miles asked about their sex lives, including one who said Miles asked whether she was a virgin, according to USA Today. In January 2013, Lewis said a student reported that Miles, quote, got on top of her in his office on his couch, leaving her traumatized, according to USA Today. LSU commissioned Taylor Porter to investigate Miles that spring for sexual harassment involving 2 female students. Lewis told USA Today that she was unaware of that probe, which was shared with few people at LSU. One student told Taylor Porter that Miles had suggested they go to a hotel or his condo together, and that the coach had kissed her inside his car. Taylor Porter and the group of LSU employees involved in the investigation decided that Miles could no longer be alone with female students, needed to attend counseling, could not text or contact student workers from his personal phones, and could not hire them to babysit Miles' children. They never shared the investigation publicly. It was finally released to the public earlier this year after USA Today filed a lawsuit demanding a copy. Lewis told USA Today that she suffered a mental breakdown over how she was treated at LSU and that she feels unsupported in her work environment. She said Seeger helped her to get counseling. Lewis also singled out Osbury as among those who took retaliatory action against her. The Hush-Blackwell report noted that several athletic department employees said they witnessed Osbury, quote, hollering and screaming at her. One employee told Hush-Blackwell that the way Osbury treated Lewis was of serious concern. Osbury, who declined to comment for this story, told Hush-Blackwell that he never treated Lewis inappropriately, adding that they had a, quote, brother-sister relationship. Quote, he is not my brother, but my supervisor, Lewis told USA Today, quote, and he should not be allowed to treat me this way, end quote. Lewis also told the newspaper that Seeger often decided on her own that certain instances she'd reported did not warrant Title IX investigations. Lewis said that's how she became the subject of a Title IX investigation in 2018, after a student said Lewis failed to properly follow up on her 2016 allegation that an LSU football player had physically abused her. LSU's Title IX office found that Lewis had failed to report the abuse and therefore was responsible for violating Title IX. But LSU's Human Resources Department never formally disciplined Lewis. USA Today reported that Lewis sent the office a letter outlining the athletic department's retaliation against her, and the HR department removed the Title IX violation from her file. Louisiana is awarded $42 million for vaccine initiatives. Staff report. Louisiana was awarded $42,796,369 from the U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention on Tuesday to support local efforts to increase vaccine uptake in communities disproportionately impacted by COVID-19. The award is part of $3 billion in funding made available to the CDC by the American Rescue Plan and other federal legislation aimed at bolstering broad-based vaccine distribution, access, and administration efforts. 75% of the total funds must focus on vaccination initiatives in racial minority communities, and at least 60% must go to support local health departments, community-based organizations, and community health centers. Sports. UL running backs ready to step up. Quote, it's our time. Cajuns not worried about void left by Mitchell and Ragas. By Kevin Foote, staff writer. As logical an assumption as it may seem to the outside world, the running back room is not something the UL Ragin' Cajuns spend any time worrying about. Last week's Pro Day featured two of the program's all-time best running backs, Elijah Mitchell and Trey Ragas. That meant those two huge contributions to UL's potent rushing attack are gone. So exactly how do you replace a combined 1,123 carries for 6,839 rushing yards and 79 touchdowns, not to mention 94 receptions for 1,024 receiving yards and 10 scores. Quote, "Don't worry, Cajun fans," say the returning members' UL offense. Quote, "It's going to be almost the same thing. Just because Elijah and Trey are gone, we've got some great backs in the backfield that can do the same thing," center Shane Vallow said. Quote, "They're going to get an opportunity this year. They didn't get it as much because we had two beasts in front of them. Now they're going to have that opportunity." Quarterback and overall team leader Levi Lewis agrees. Quote, "We've got guys ready to go," Lewis insisted. "I don't feel worried at all. They're not going to drop the ball. They're going to pick up right where we left off. Everything's going to run smooth." Quote, "Our O-line is going to take care of those guys. The hole's going to be big, and all they've got to do is hit the hole and play fast." Junior running back TJ Wisham said it's more of a mentality in the running back room than an actual comparison of skill sets that gives him confidence there won't be a drop-off. Quote, "We're definitely losing some talent, but we always have talent in our room," Wisham said. "One thing we say around the building here is, it's the whole room. That's something we live up to in our running back room, regardless of if you're the first string guy or the last guy on the depth chart." From day one, running backs coach Jabbar Jalouk hammers a mentality of, quote, "game day reps every day in practice" into each running back in the room. It's why Wisham wasn't shocked at all when Mitchell posted such impressive workout numbers for NFL scouts at Pro Day. It's also why Wisham quickly rebutted any inferences when he asked why he thinks the production won't dip. Quote, "I know that's going to be the case," he said. "That's the standard, so we're not going to let it not be the case." Primarily a special teams standout with the Cajuns, Wisham is one of several options to fill the void left by Mitchell and Ragas. This will be his best opportunity yet to get some carries, despite still recovering from a wrist injury that cost him most of the 2020 season. He's expected to be fully healthy for August camp. Quote, "I can't tell you how motivated I've been," he said. "We know it's our time to step up and take the throne. It's motivation every day, just trying to get better and get ready for the fall when September comes." The most accomplished returning option is Chris Smith, who has shined as an All-American kick returner in addition to rushing for 350 yards and a touchdown on 62 carries last season. Imani Bailey and Michael Orphy combined for 121 yards and one score on 14 carries. Also added to the mix this season is Incarnate Word transfer Jacob Kibodi. Quote, "You could compare him to like an Eli Mitchell," Lewis said of Kibodi. "He can run it, and he could come out of the backfield and catch the ball. He's a great route runner. He's real athletic." The Cajuns will also be joined by 3 incoming freshmen in Montrell Johnson from New Orleans, Draylon Washington from Hempel, Texas, and Karen Crow's Kendrell Williams, as well as potentially Terrence Williams of Manny. Fortunately, running back is one of the few holes a coach could potentially trust a true freshman to help fill. Quote, "Anywhere I've been, a young skilled player on offense, probably more than any other position on your team, can come in and impact your team," Napier said. So then you throw the 3 high school rookies into the mix this summer, and it's going to be a very competitive situation there to determine who plays, who gets in the rotation, and who gets the carries. Funerals today in the Acadiana area. John Betar, St. Peter Catholic Church at 11 a.m. Priscilla Fontes, St. Peter Roman Catholic Church in Carencro at 11 a.m. Paul Hebert, St. Michael the Archangel Catholic Church, Crowley, 2 p.m. Ulyss Miller, St. Joseph Catholic Church, Iota at 10 a.m. This has been Local News Live for April 7th, 2021. I have been your reader, Phyllis Grifford. Join us at 9 a.m. Monday through Friday on AOC 1, Cypress Street Radio, or the AOC Community Media channel on YouTube. You can read these stories and more at theadvocate.com and find out how to volunteer and more at aocinc.org.